And hello and greetings to you in the name of our Lord and our Savior, Jesus Christ. It is our joy to have you with us as we continue our study of revealing the truth about the Quran. And today we will be talking about the Quran to be the Word of Allah and how the Quran was collected together. And as we look at this topic, we will discover that from the collection of the Quran, we know for sure that the Quran has been changed. Remember in our last program, we talked about the unchanged Quran as we read from Quran chapter 6 and verse 34, and no one can change the words of Allah. That's what Muslims believe. As also we read in the Quran, Muslims say, yet it is a glorious Quran in a guarded board, as it is written in Quran chapter 85, verses 21 and 22. And we explained at the time that the Quran, as Muslims claim, was written even before the creation of the world. You see, the first thing Allah created was a pen, and then He created the board, and He wrote on the board all the description of everything He's about to create, and He also put on this board the entire Quran. Now, is this claim true, or is this just a propaganda Islam? Of course, we will see from the collection of the Quran that this statement is not true. Now I'd like to move to another verse in the Quran to see what Allah literally is writing to all the Muslim about the Quran. He said in Quran chapter 15 verse 9, surely we have sent down the reminder and surely we will be its guardian. And I know some of our Muslim friends will say that the reminder here, which is the word al-zikr in the Arabic language, Allah meant by it the Quran. But obviously we see also the Quran, the word, the reminder is talking about the Bible. It's talking about Moses' writings. As Allah called the Christian and the Jews the people of the reminder, Ahl al-Zikr. So what is a reminder? It is actually everything written by Allah, and when you read it, you remember Allah. When you read it, you remember the things of the past. That's why it's called the reminder. But in this Quran, chapter 15, verse 9, Muslims say it is the Quran. This word, the reminder, is the Quran. So it's like saying, surely we have sent down the Quran and surely we will be its guardian. Is this true? Now, I'd like to share with you in our program today about the collection of the Quran, to see the truth about the collection of the Quran. And before we get to this, I would like to share one more verse from the Quran. Because you ask the Muslim, is the Quran perfect? Is the Quran unchanged? Do we have any contradiction in the Quran? The Muslims say, absolutely not. And you say, why you do not believe that there is anything wrong with the Quran? They will tell you, because Allah in the Quran said that. And you say, what verse you're talking about? They will say, let's go to Quran chapter 4 and verse 82. As Allah said, do they not consider the Quran? If it was from others than Allah, they would have found in it many inconsistencies. You see, our dear Muslim friend believe that the Quran is the perfect word of Allah because Allah said in the Quran it is the perfect and there is no any inconsistencies in the whole entire Quran. But if that's true, the Quran will be true, word of Allah. But if this is not true, that means this is just hogwash. It's a cheap talk. And as we study the Quran, not to read the Quran as Muslim Imams do, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim or Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. You know, there are two sets of people in Islam read the Quran. One, those who read by leaning back and forth, and then those who go right and left. That's not how we understand the Quran. That's not how we study the Quran. And I know Muslims are missing this very important portion in their daily worship or their weekly prayers, that they don't have a Sunday school time like we do in the Christian faith. See, we go to the church and we have the Bible study and we investigate the Bible and we read the Bible and we ask many questions. But Muslims don't do that. Muslims just read the Quran. They wash their hands, dry them with clean towels, they bring the Quran, open it in front of them with high respect and in the Quran. And they start reading by moving their head this way or that way, and that's how they read the Quran. Now, do the Muslim understand what they're reading? That's a good question. The answer most likely is no. Even if you read the interpretation of Muslim scholars, still no. Why? Because Muslim scholars disagree on many of the things about the Quran, many of the things about the Word of Allah. But Muslims claim that there is no any inconsistency throughout the Quran. But when you study the Quran, investigate the Quran, you see plenty of contradiction, plenty of inconsistency. And of course, we're not going to talk about this today. That's another program for another time. But here I would like to share with you the challenge which Muslims give to us. As we read, Muslims said the Quran was recorded in writing as well as in the memory of many people in the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad, and was compiled in book form according to his direction by his companions shortly after his death. You know, first time I read that this information, I could not believe my eyes. So I read it again to make sure I got it right. And what the Muslims are teaching here in America about the collection of the Quran is literally a challenge against themselves, because they cannot prove that. They're telling us that the Quran was recorded in writings and in memory. So the entire Quran was written in pages, all right? And at the same time, people memorized the Quran. And then they said it was collected in a book form. Like, here we go, chapter 1, Al-Fatiha. Chapter 2, the cow. Chapter 3, the family of Imran. Chapter 4, the women. Chapter 5, Al-Ma'idah, the table. And all these was collected just shortly after Muhammad died. According, did you listen carefully here? According to Muhammad's direction. So it's not like Abu Bakr, what do you like to put first? Well, let's put this book first. Or let's this book second. One of the great complaints I hear from many of the people who read the Quran in America, they tell me, how in the world this book is put in this order? I mean, we see Mecca chapters, and then Medini chapters, and then Mecca chapters, and inside the Mecca chapters there are Medini verses, and inside the Medini verses there are Mecca verses. It's a chaos. There's no order. Because I believe deep in my heart that Muhammad did not know who came first and who came second, which means we do not know is Abraham was before Noah, or Moses after Abraham, or Jesus came. I mean, we do not know who came first. And the proof is when you read the Quran. Even when Muhammad lists the names of the Prophet, he puts them in a chaos order. Simply because I believe Muhammad did not know anything about the true history of the biblical account, who came first and who came second. But the challenge once again is for us. We must challenge a Muslim of their challenge to us. They are telling us that the Quran is the perfect word of Allah, never been changed, never been corrupted. It was actually people memorized the entire Quran, and people memorized and people wrote the entire chapters of the Quran, and it was collected just after Muhammad died according to his direction. That is a false information. These are not true, and the proof is very simple. If you study the history of the collection of the Quran by Muslim scholars as they have taught it to me when I was in the public schools of Egypt, they did not tell us that, oh, the Quran was all written and Abu Bakr and Umar got together and just after Muhammad died, and they just put it in the right order as Muhammad taught them, and here we end with the Quran. No, 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 no. Listen to this story. It says, Umar ibn al-Khattab was distressed by the fact that many of the reciters of the Quran were killed during the war of the apostasy. Since these were the men who had memorized parts of the Quran, he afraid that soon some of the Quran would be lost. He then asked Abu Bakr to commission a collection of the Quran. And let me talk to you for a minute here. You see, the war of apostasy is the first civil war among Muslims. And believe it or not, from that day until today, Muslims are still killing each other. The civil war we see today in Syria, or we see today in Iraq, or we see today in any Muslim country among the 57 Muslim countries, it's the circle of repeating the history of Islam. It's always been there. But this war of apostasy is a very sad day to the Muslims. Why? As you're going to see in a minute here, as we already read, we'll continue with it. In this war, many of the Muslims who memorized parts of the Quran dropped dead. What is the war of apostasy? That is to kill all those who left Islam. Why is that? Because they apostate. Why is that? Because Muslims practice the teaching of Allah in the Quran. We call this honor killing in the West because if a young lady or a young man left Islam and became, say, a Christian or a Jew or something else, then the parents or the people of the mosque are obligated to kill this person. And if you investigate it with the media in America, they will tell you it's just honor killing, it's culture in Islam, have nothing to do with Islam. But I'm sorry, that's not true. Why? Because when you go to Quran chapter 6 and verse 151, Allah said, do not kill the soul which Allah forbid except with a just cause. Which means what? You don't kill the Muslim because that is the soul which Allah forbidden to be killed, because you can kill Christian, you can kill Jew, that's fine, there's no problem. Allah is commanding the Muslim to kill all non-Muslims. But you cannot kill the Muslim, which is the soul which Allah forbid to be killed, except for a just cause. Now let's ask Muhammad in Sahih Muslim, what is the just cause for killing a Muslim? Muhammad will tell you, the just cause is if the Muslim commit murder, that's killing another Muslim, or commit adultery, or if the Muslim apostate, that is if the Muslim leave Islam to anything else. And that's exactly what happened in the early days of Islam. The day Muhammad died, not a week later or a month later, the day Muhammad died, many of the Muslims left Islam. Now they're free. They're no longer under the thumb of this dictator Muhammad. And since they left Islam, they commit the sin of apostasy. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and the wonderful strong Muslims, those who stick with Islam, they decided to go in war against them. As they went in war with those who apostate, many of the good Muslims, those who memorized part of the Quran, dropped dead. We know that Umar asked Abu Bakr, we need to put the Quran in a written form. And you know what Abu Bakr said? He said, no, we will never do that. And if you ask Abu Bakr, what's wrong to put the Quran in a book form? He would tell you, we will never do anything Muhammad never asked us to do. Wait a minute. That go against the challenge which Muslim given us. They said, according to Muhammad's direction, the Quran was put in a book form. In the right order, we see it today. Well, I'm sorry, that's a lie. Muhammad never gave any command or any order, any direction to anyone to put the Quran in a book form. So the debate go between Umar, the first Khalifa, and Abu Bakr, the first Khalifa, and Umar, the second Khalifa, about should we put the Quran in book form? No, we are not going to do it. Muhammad said we should not do it. They were not going to do it. Well, guess what? Umar won the debate. Why? Because this war of apostasy was not just for a few hours or a few days. It took a long time. And many of the reciters of the Quran, many of those who memorized portions of the Quran dropped dead. And now Umar convinced Abu Bakr, we're losing the Quran. We have to put it in a book form or we'll lose it for good. Well, let's continue with our reading. After Abu Bakr was convinced, we read that Abu Bakr thought out Zayd ibn Sabit, a close follower of Muhammad, to undertaking the task. All right, let's move with our reading. We read after that Zayd said, this is a man who chose to put the Quran together. By Allah, he spoke to Abu Bakr here and said, by Allah, if they had ordered me to shift one of the mountain, it would not be have been heavier for me than this ordering me to collect the Quran. And here is the truth, my dear friends. Why Zayd ibn Sabit saw that the collection of the Quran is a hard job? Because there was no Quran to collect. I know our dear Muslim friends will tell us here in America, well, the reason Zayd ibn Sabit was so concerned about the collection of the Quran, and he saw it to be a very hard subject to do, because he believed literally if he make one mistake, if he make one error, can you imagine? If Zayd ibn Sabit forgot one verse or put the wrong word, that would be changing the word of Allah. That's why it is so hard. It was so difficult for Zayd ibn Sabit to put the Quran together. But that's not true, my friends. I believe this is a lie. For the truth is, when you look at the material which Zayd ibn Sabit was using to collect the Quran, you will realize how hard and how difficult this job was. Listen to the advice given from Abu Bakr as-Siddiq to Zayd ibn Sabit as he encouraged him. Don't worry, man, you can do it. Allah will help you. Listen to what Abu Bakr said. He said, then I said to Abu Bakr, how will you do something which Allah's apostle did not do? Abu Bakr replied, by Allah, it is a good project. This is exactly what Abu Bakr said. And notice here, the rejection of Zayd ibn Thabit to collect the Quran, it is the same rejection which Abu Bakr used earlier with Umar. How can we do something the Apostle of Allah Muhammad never asked us to do? Muhammad never asked early Muslim followers, not Abu Bakr, not Umar, not Zayd ibn Thabit, not any of his Sahaba, his friends or fellow Muslim men, to collect the Quran in a book or to write the Quran at all. But Abu Bakr challenged and encouraged Zayd ibn Thabit. He said, by Allah's will, this will be a great project. When we will meet again in our next broadcast, we will look at the Quran during Muhammad days. That's when Muhammad was alive. Was there only one Quran? Was there only one Quran as Muslim claim in the West? Or there were maybe different Qurans? And until we meet again in our next broadcast, may the true God of the Bible continue to bless you and yours.